One Day in Oradour, Part 4, Chapter 11, The Troops Arrive. Saturday the 10th of June, 1944, early afternoon. By 2 o'clock, the terrace at the Hotel de la Glane was finally beginning to empty, and the diners, re-energised and refreshed, began to drift away to spend the afternoon visiting friends, lazing by the river or browsing the shops and street stalls. Patrick de Paul drove his Peugeot 202 over the bridge across the River Glane and slowed down as he entered his home village. He had bought the parts he needed for his father's car and had made the 19-kilometre drive back from Limoges in good time. Now he was looking forward to getting back to the garage so he could complete the job and finish up early for the day. If he had a spare hour or two before dinner, he could even squeeze in a spot of fishing. He would take Bobby with him. That daft little dog loved sniffing about on the river bank while Patrick fished, but he didn't like the water. He never went in, no matter how hot it was. Funny that. Patrick pulled up outside his garage and switched off the ignition. As always, he paused to listen to the engine as it rumbled to a stop. Yep, he thought, she sounds happy enough. Then his mechanically trained ears picked up the sound of several much heavier vehicles, also approaching from the direction of Limoges. Patrick got out of his car and shielded his eyes with his hand, squinting in the bright sunlight as he looked up the street to see what was causing the commotion. This didn't sound like ordinary village traffic. A deep engine rumble was accompanied by a dreadful metallic clanking sound. What Patrick saw next did not immediately alarm him, although it was an unusual sight for Oradour. 2 armoured vehicles, followed by a convoy of smaller army trucks laden with German soldiers. Patrick's first thought was that they were just passing through, but then the convoy stopped opposite the hotel, across the entrance to the fairground, and to his astonishment a flood of German soldiers, dressed in green and yellow camouflage jackets, poured out into the street. The troops formed a circle around the convoy and slowly started spreading outwards in all directions. Losing all thought of fixing his father's car, Patrick ran around the street corner back towards the church. Were there any more soldiers coming? As he passed the barber's shop, he heard a shout. "Patrick, quick, come over here!" It was Jean Neville, scissors and comb in hand, standing in his doorway. "Did you see that convoy? Where did it go?" Patrick explained what he had just witnessed. "One of my customers has just arrived from Conflans for a haircut. He said there's another group of soldiers up by the Fournier cottage at the far end of the village. They closed the road just after he came through. What the devil's going on?" "I have no idea," said Patrick, "but I'll go back down to the Glane to see if they've closed that road too." Patrick jogged down the road, then ascended the steep path in front of the church. As the church was set up above street level, he could stand on the boundary wall and get a clear view down the hill back towards the bridge. Sure enough, he could see more Germans dragging a barricade across the road on the far side of the river. He didn't like the look of this one bit. Patrick wondered what was happening on the road to the northeast beyond Alfred's school and on the road southwest towards Saint-Junien. It didn't take a betting man to predict that those roads were probably being closed too, and this was bound to create unease. The people of Oradour weren't used to seeing Germans at all, let alone having them seal off their village. Patrick decided to head back into the village centre. He'd see if his father was at home. As mayor, he ought to know what was going on. Perhaps he could speak to the Germans and find out what they wanted. As he followed the road back round past his garage, Patrick saw Sylvie Fournier, Alfred's mother, hurrying down the street towards him. "Sylvie, are you all right?" he asked, catching her arm. She looked awfully worried. "I don't know," Sylvie answered, seemingly unsure whether or not to carry on her way. "I have to get to the church to help Audrey, but did you see those Germans? I've just spoken to Pierre Petit. He was coming out of the wine store when the trucks arrived. And he says there's nothing to worry about, but I'm not sure I agree." "I'm sure Pierre's right," said Patrick, trying not to show his own fears. He could see that Sylvie was getting more and more agitated by the second. "We've never had any trouble with Germans here in Oradour." "Maybe not, but I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them, and I've left little Paulette and Louis with Leon. They're in the fairground getting tobacco. Alfred and the 2 girls are down at the school, and here I am worrying about upsetting Audrey over some stupid flower arrangements. We have a family pact, you see, something we agreed to do if we ever saw any Germans in Oradour. Look, Sylvie, I know what you've gone through, but this is different. This is Oradour. You're safe here. I'm sure you don't need to worry, but if you like, I'll pop back into the church and explain to Audrey that you're going to be delayed. Then you can go and check on your family. Audrey will just have to understand. Tears came to Sylvie's eyes and she squeezed Patrick's hand. Thank you, Patrick. You're a good friend. Tell her I'll come back as soon as I can, but I have to put my family first. And with that, Sylvie ran off up the street to find her husband and her 2 youngest children, desperately trying to convince herself that history was not about to be repeated.